Welcome to Pagoda Podcast, where we explore ideas, strategies, and insights to help businesses grow and scale.
Glad to be here for this one. We've got a really interesting topic today.
Yeah, we absolutely do. Today, we're doing a deep dive into an incredibly revealing discussion about the 7 deadly sins of business exit planning.
Right. Specifically, pulling from some great source material about how founders unintentionally kill their own company's value.
Exactly. So I want you, the listener, to just imagine something for a second. You've spent, I don't know, maybe 20 years building this multi-million-dollar business, right?
Blood, sweat, and tears.
Literally. You've sacrificed your weekends, you've missed family dinners, you've survived economic downturn, and finally, you're ready for the big payoff.
The dream of retirement. Or maybe just moving on to the next venture.
Yeah, exactly. So you sit down at the negotiating table, and the buyer slides a piece of paper across the desk. But the offer is just an absolute fraction of what you thought your life's work was actually worth.
Ugh, yeah. That is just a devastating moment.
It really is.
And, the hardest part for a founder to swallow in that scenario is that the buyer usually isn't even trying to insult them.
Right.
The buyer is simply pricing in all these massive, invisible structural flaws that the founder basically spent 2 decades ignoring.
And that harsh reality is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive. We're looking at these counterintuitive ways that, honestly, brilliant business owners just sabotage their own valuations.
Yeah, and the mission here is to figure out how to flip that script, right? To learn how to think like a buyer long before you ever actually plan to sell.
Which really requires a total paradigm shift. Because the overarching theme from the source material is that exit planning is not an event.
Right, it's not a finish line.
Exactly. It's a long-term strategy. It has to be built into the everyday operations years in advance.
Which brings us to the very first mistake.
Right.
Right. And it's probably the most common one. Founders just wait way too long to start planning.
They treat selling like it's this spontaneous decision, like waking up one day and deciding to have a garage sale.
Exactly. And I mean, it's understandable if you look at the psychology of an entrepreneur. When you're building a company, your head is down.
Yeah.
You're just completely hyper-focused.
Right. You're looking at next quarter's revenue or hiring a new manager.
Yeah. The whole concept of selling feels so abstract. But if you wait until you're totally burned out to start getting your house in order, you've fundamentally lost your leverage.
Because selling a business is nothing like selling a used car. You can't just, vacuum the floor mats and run it through a car wash the morning the buyer shows up.
No, not at all.
It's way more like selling a house. You cannot hide a cracked foundation or bad plumbing with just a fresh coat of paint in the living room.
That is a perfect analogy. Because the buyer's inspector, which in this case is their due diligence team, they are going to find those cracks.
And the deal will just completely collapse.
Exactly. And the very first place a due diligence team looks for cracks is in the financials. Messy math is just a catastrophic deal killer.
What kind of messy math are we talking about here?
Oh, things like commingled personal and business expenses or inconsistent reporting standards. Just revenue that isn't categorized clearly.
I can hear a lot of founders right now thinking, well, so what if my bookkeeping is a little sloppy? The revenue is still there, right?
Yeah, people think that all the time.
Like, why does a messy spreadsheet suddenly tank my entire valuation?
Well, to understand that, you have to look at how businesses are actually valued. Buyers don't just pay for your past revenue.
Right.
They pay a multiple of your profit based on how safe they feel those future cash flows are. So mathematically, uncertainty equals risk.
And risk compresses your multiple.
Exactly. So if a buyer's team finds, say, a $10,000 discrepancy in your profit and loss statements, they don't just subtract 10 grand from their offer.
Let me guess. They assume the entire accounting system is basically compromised.
You nailed it. They assume the underlying operations are totally chaotic. So instead of offering you like a 4 times multiple, they slash it to a 2 times multiple just to protect themselves.
Wow. So a sloppy bookkeeping habit didn't just cost you 10 grand. It literally cost you half the value of your entire business.
Half your life's work, gone. Just because of disorganized math.
That is wild. Okay, so getting the timeline right and the math spotless is step 1. But the source material brings up another massive hurdle.
Oh, yeah, the owner dependency issue.
Right. And this requires the founder to do something really uncomfortable. They have to critically examine their own role. I like to call this the founder's paradox.
It's a great name for it. Because what happens when the business's greatest asset, the founder, becomes its most toxic liability?
See, I have to push back on this a little bit because if I put myself in the shoes of an owner, this feels completely backwards.
How so?
Well, aren't buyers desperately looking for a passionate, highly involved founder? Like, if I'm the ultimate rainmaker and all the clients love me personally, shouldn't that make my company way more valuable?
I mean, it sounds incredibly logical, right?
Yeah.
Until you shift your perspective. You have to stop viewing the business as something you run and start viewing it as an independent asset.
Okay, so think like an investor.
Exactly. When an acquiring firm buys your company, they are not buying your resume. They can't clone your charisma or your 20 years of industry intuition.
Because the second I sign those closing documents and head to the beach, all that magic leaves the building with me.
You're literally taking the engine of the company out the door. A sophisticated buyer wants an independent, cash-flowing machine.
Right.
If that machine relies entirely on the founder's daily heroics, the buyer isn't getting an asset. They're just buying a highly stressful, really expensive job for themselves.
That is a terrifying realization. If your revenue is tied to your personal relationships, your valuation just plummets. You actually become a bottleneck to your own wealth.
And stepping out of that bottleneck is psychologically brutal for a successful entrepreneur.
Because you're used to being the superhero.
Yeah, exactly. You swoop in, you close the big deals, you solve the supply chain crises. It strokes the ego to be indispensable.
But to get that premium valuation, you have to deliberately make yourself completely obsolete.
Systematically obsolete, yes.
Okay, so if the founder steps back and removes themselves from the center of everything, what actually replaces them? Like, how do you replace human intuition without the company descending into total chaos?
You replace it with the architecture of predictability. And this is where the source material gets really granular about structural mechanics.
Predictability. I like that.
Yeah, it basically comes down to three specific failures to avoid.
Mm.
Lack of documented systems, ignoring recurring revenue, and failing to diversify your customers.
Let's talk about the systems first. I always look at this like buying a famous local restaurant.
Oh, that's a good way to frame it.
Yeah, if I'm an investor buying this place, am I buying the genius celebrity chef who invents specials on the fly but never writes anything down?
Or are you buying the exact, meticulously documented recipe book?
Exactly. The recipe book that any competent chef could use to recreate that exact same magic.
And a buyer wants the recipe book every single time. Because, what happens if that celebrity chef gets sick or just burns out?
The business collapses overnight.
Right. Repeatable processes allow a buyer to say, I see exactly how this generates cash, and I have total confidence it will keep generating cash after the founder leaves.
That repeatability is the actual product you're selling, which flows right into the next red flag. Unpredictable revenue.
Oh, yeah. This is huge.
Because if your sales team has to aggressively hunt for every single dollar at the start of every month, that is just an exhausting, volatile way to run things.
It's the definition of high risk. Buyers place a massive premium on predictable recurring revenue.
Like subscriptions or long-term contracts.
Exactly. If you can shift from project-based one-off sales to maintenance contracts or retainers, you fundamentally change the math.
Wow.
Yeah, $1 of contracted recurring revenue is often valued at 3 to 5 times more than $1 of unpredictable revenue, simply because the buyer doesn't have to guess if the money will show up next year.
You're selling them a guaranteed future instead of just a hopeful projection. But even if you have that recurring revenue, there's another trap, right? Customer concentration.
Classic whale scenario.
Right.
This is one of the most common ways founders accidentally build a house of cards. Imagine a company where like 60% of their revenue comes from just one massive client.
The whale. And on paper, the business looks incredibly successful because the revenue numbers are huge.
But the leverage in that relationship is entirely backward. If one client makes up 60% of your revenue, they essentially own your business.
Because they can demand lower margins or stretch out payment terms, and you just have to say yes.
You have to comply, or you can't make payroll. And a buyer is going to look at that client roster and immediately see a glaring red light.
Right. They model out the worst case scenario. If that whale client gets a new CEO who changes vendors, your business is wiped out by a single phone call.
And the downward spiral from losing a whale is just catastrophic. You lose revenue, you lay off staff, quality drops for the remaining clients. It's over.
So buyers want to see revenue distributed across dozens or hundreds of clients to insulate the business from that single point of failure. Okay, let's pause and map out this minefield we've just walked through. We know we have to start years in advance. We need immaculate financials.
Right.
The founder has to crush their own ego. We need documented systems, recurring revenue, and diversified clients.
Simple.
In theory, sure. But let's talk about the daily reality. When you're in the grind, putting out constant fires, dealing with HR, trying to hit growth targets, how on earth do you objectively measure these things?
And that is the ultimate challenge. It points directly to the final mistake highlighted in the material,
Yeah.
a failure to actually understand and monitor valuation drivers.
What exactly is a valuation driver in this context? Because it's clearly not just top-line revenue.
No, top-line revenue is often just a vanity metric if your margins are terrible. A valuation driver is a specific, measurable lever that directly increases the multiple a buyer will pay.
Give me a few examples of that.
Sure. Things like your gross margin trend over a 3-year period,
Hmm?
or the operational stability of your middle management. Customer acquisition cost is a big one.
But again, how does a founder accurately measure the strength of their own management team? They're in the trenches with these people every single day.
The brutal truth is, they usually can't. Attempting to objectively evaluate your own business is like trying to proofread a novel you've spent 10 years writing.
Oh, that makes sense. Your brain just fills in the missing words.
Exactly. You autocorrect the typos without even realizing it. You can't see the flaws because you know what it's supposed to look like.
Your emotional bias completely blinds you to the structural risks.
You've got emotional attachments to legacy products that lose money, or deep loyalty to early employees who just can't scale with the company.
So what's the solution?
This is why the source material strongly advocates for a structured, external approach. The discussion specifically details how Black Pagoda operates as an advisor to solve this exact problem.
By stripping away that emotional bias.
Completely. They take a highly structured approach, utilizing AI-powered analysis to look at the raw financial performance and operational data. They don't look through the lens of the founder's memories.
They look at it through the cold, calculating lens of an institutional buyer.
Precisely. They act as that objective mirror. They pinpoint the exact risk exposures, whether it's key person dependency or messy accounting, and then build a clear transition plan.
Which shifts exit planning from a panicked, last-minute scramble into a deliberate strategy.
Right. The goal is to help owners grow, scale, and sell with total confidence.
It's kind of like the difference between hoping you're healthy and actually going to a specialist for a full MRI.
That's exactly it.
Having a structured professional run the diagnostics is what actually guarantees you get the premium valuation. And, for anyone listening who wants to see how this diagnostic process works, they encourage visiting www.blackpagoda.com.
Engaging with that kind of objective analysis forces a profound shift. You stop running the business just for today's profits, and you start engineering it for tomorrow's seamless transferability.
Which perfectly sets us up to synthesize the core takeaways here. If we distill all of this into 3 absolute imperatives for our listeners, the blueprint is pretty clear.
The first one is straightforward but constantly ignored. Start early.
Time is the one asset you can't manufacture.
Exactly. Untangling personal expenses, shifting to recurring revenue, diversifying clients. That takes years of deliberate execution, not weeks.
The second imperative is build systems, not just sales. Top-line revenue strokes the ego, but if it relies on your personal heroics, it holds almost zero value to a buyer.
You have to build the recipe book and retire your role as the celebrity chef.
And the third imperative.
You must condition yourself to think like a buyer long before you become a seller. Look at your operations through the skeptical lens of a stranger writing a massive check.
Where's the friction? What happens if your top salesperson quits tomorrow?
Exactly. It really just dismantles the biggest myth of all. Exit planning isn't a singular finish line event. It's a continuous long-term growth strategy.
Every operational decision you make today, who you hire, what software you use, directly affects the transferability of the business tomorrow.
And the beautiful irony is that a business engineered to be sold is actually vastly easier, more profitable, and more enjoyable to run right now.
That is an incredibly powerful realization. A highly sellable business is simply a highly successful business.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, slightly uncomfortable challenge, a little stress test for your enterprise.
Oh, I love a good stress test.
Ask yourself this with brutal honesty. If you were forced to step away from your operations tomorrow morning, no smartphone, no laptop, vanishing completely off the grid for 6 full months, what is the very first thing that would break?
That is the ultimate diagnostic question.
Would your lead generation dry up? Would your fulfillment pipeline collapse? Would your biggest client panic and leave?
Whatever your immediate answer is to that question, that specific breaking point, that is exactly what is quietly eroding your current valuation.
Find that specific crack in your foundation and start the hard work of fixing it today.
Well said. That is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into building true transferable value.
It's been a great conversation.
We hope this provided the clarity you need to stop acting as your business's biggest bottleneck and start engineering an asset that commands the premium valuation your life's work deserves. Keep building, keep questioning, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.